Lesson number 82 today is all about evaluation with signed numbers. And our first problem says to simplify. And you can see as we go through here, we've got a combination of multiplication and subtraction. We know based on our order of operations that we need to do multiplication first. So let's do that. We're going to start with 2 times negative 4. Well, the opposite of a positive must be a negative. So we're going to get an answer of negative 8. When we multiply 2 times negative 4. Then we're going to write minus 3, minus, and we've got more multiplication here. We've got negative 6 times negative 3. The opposite of a negative is a positive, so negative 6 times negative 3, that must be positive 18. Very good. We can go ahead and work through the next part of our problem. Now the next part of our problem, it's important that we always add rather than add and subtract. So what we're going to do is we're going to say negative 8, and then instead of saying minus 3, what we're going to do is we're going to say plus negative 3, because saying negative 8 minus 3 is the same thing as saying negative 8 plus negative 3. And it's easier to think about these problems when we're always adding rather than adding and subtracting. So instead of saying minus 18, we're going to push the negative into the 18, and we're going to say plus negative 18. And now we can find our answer. Negative 8 plus negative 3, that must be negative 11. Negative 11 plus negative 18 is going to give us our final answer. Well, that must be negative 29. We're all done. We can box it and move on to our next question. Key thing in this problem is making sure you use the correct order of operations, multiplication first. Then, when we're to our subtraction, we really want to add negative numbers rather than subtract to find our answer. Let's look at our next problem. We want to evaluate. And when we want to evaluate here, we're going to take our expression and we're going to substitute the values that are given for x and y. The first thing we need to do is put parentheses around all of our variables. So instead of writing negative x, we're going to write negative parenthesis, because we're going to substitute our x value of negative 3 into that parenthesis so we can figure out what our answer is. Then we're going to have minus x times y. So we put those parentheses first. Then wherever we see an x, we're going to put negative 3, because that's what the problem tells us it's equal to. Then wherever we see a y, our last number, or our last space, we're going to put negative 4. So again, in this problem, we've got to simplify with multiplication first. Well, as we look here, we can see we have minus negative 3. The opposite of a negative, that's a positive. So minus or double negative 3, that's going to be equal to positive 3. So we're going to get 3 minus, and then we have negative 3 times negative 4. Well, negative 3 times negative 4, that must be positive 12, because we've got two negative numbers. When you multiply two negative numbers, you get a positive. So now we have 3 minus 12. You might be able to solve that in your head. Or you could do this. You could say it's going to be equal to 3 plus negative 12. I like adding, and it's a little bit easier to think about always adding positive and negative numbers rather than moving back and forth between addition and subtraction. So 3 plus negative 12, that's going to be equal to negative 9. We've got our final answer. Let's box it, and now we can move on to our next question. Here we have a similar problem. We know what our x value is equal to. We know what our a values are equal to. So let's put in our parentheses first. Wherever we see an x, we're going to put negative 3, because that's what the problem tells us to do. Wherever we see an a, we're going to put in a 2. And now we're going to simplify. So we have minus 2, that's really just negative 2. Minus, we have to do the multiplication first. Negative 3 times 2, the opposite of a positive is a negative, so negative 3 times 2 must be negative 6. Now we're going to add instead of subtract, so we're going to push the negative into the number, and we're going to get negative 2 plus, we just move our negatives over, plus minus negative 6. Well, the opposite of a negative is a positive, So a double negative, two negatives in a row, give us a positive. So we're going to get 6, and we have negative 2 plus 6. Well, negative 2 plus 6, that's an easy one. That must be equal to 4. We've got our answer. Let's box it. And we're all done with our lesson for today. Lesson practice will be on page 258. Make sure you've got your notes complete, and I'll see you during our next class.